The latest discussion comes from market commentator Frank26, who shared his long-standing opinion regarding what he believes could eventually happen with the Iraqi dinar. According to his comments, he has consistently argued that Iraq could ultimately pursue what he describes as a reinstatement, often referred to as an RI, rather than simply maintaining the current exchange rate indefinitely. He suggested that before 2003, the Iraqi dinar carried a significantly higher official value, and stated that an exchange rate around $3.22 per Iraqi dinar represented the level that existed before major political and economic changes reshaped Iraq's financial system. He further referenced discussions from 2012 involving Iraqi officials, who reportedly believed that inflation and broader economic conditions should be taken into account, leading him to speculate that an even higher figure could eventually be justified. He then extended that opinion by suggesting that market forces, including supply and demand, could potentially result in a value exceeding $4 if a floating exchange rate were ever introduced. It is important to begin by recognizing that these comments represent personal analysis and speculation, rather than official policy. No announcement from the Central Bank of Iraq, the Iraqi government, the International Monetary Fund, or any recognized international financial institution has confirmed a future exchange rate anywhere near those figures. As responsible observers of Iraq's economy, it is essential to distinguish between personal expectations shared by commentators and verified monetary policy communicated by official authorities. To better understand this discussion, we first need to examine the concept of reinstatement. Within Iraqi dinar communities, the term reinstatement generally refers to the idea that Iraq could restore the dinar to a value similar to the one it held before the 2003 conflict. Supporters of this theory argue that the previous value reflects the country's long-term economic potential, and that future reforms could eventually support a stronger national currency. However, mainstream economists often point out that historical exchange rates cannot simply be restored without considering today's completely different economic environment. Iraq's economy, banking system, money supply, fiscal structure, population, public spending, foreign reserves, and international financial relationships have all changed dramatically over the past 2 decades. One of the biggest reasons economists approach these discussions cautiously is that exchange rates are not determined by history alone. A country's currency value depends on a wide range of variables, including productivity, inflation, government debt, fiscal discipline, monetary policy, foreign investment, international trade balances, political stability, confidence in financial institutions, and central bank credibility. Even countries with enormous natural resources cannot simply assign a higher exchange rate without ensuring that the underlying economic fundamentals support that valuation. Frank26 also referenced discussions from 2012 involving Iraqi planning and finance officials who reportedly believed inflation adjustments should be considered. Inflation certainly plays a significant role in any country's monetary policy. Over time, rising prices reduce purchasing power, meaning historical values cannot always be compared directly with today's economic conditions. Governments regularly analyze inflation when making budget decisions, wage adjustments, pension reforms, and long-term fiscal planning. However, acknowledging inflation does not automatically imply that a currency should be revalued by the same percentage. Exchange rate decisions involve far more complex calculations than inflation alone. When discussing the Iraqi dinar, another important factor is the role of the Central Bank of Iraq. The central bank manages exchange rate policy, with the primary objective of maintaining monetary stability. Over recent years, Iraqi authorities have repeatedly emphasized exchange rate stability as an important component of economic confidence. Stable exchange rates help businesses plan investments, reduce uncertainty for importers and exporters, support government budgeting, and encourage confidence within the banking system. If Iraq were ever to implement significant monetary reforms, such reforms would likely occur within a carefully planned framework, rather than through sudden unexpected changes. International financial institutions generally encourage gradual implementation, extensive preparation, transparent communication, and strong banking supervision whenever major monetary reforms are considered. These principles help minimize market disruption and protect both businesses and ordinary citizens. Another point raised in the commentary involves the possibility of a future floating exchange rate. Floating exchange rates operate differently from fixed or managed exchange rate systems. Under a floating system, market participants largely determine currency values through buying and selling activity. Supply and demand influence daily price movements, while central banks may intervene only when necessary to maintain orderly market conditions. Some observers believe that Iraq could eventually transition toward greater exchange rate flexibility once its financial system becomes stronger and more integrated into global markets. Others argue that maintaining stability remains more appropriate, while banking reforms continue. Both perspectives recognize that any transition would require substantial preparation and confidence in Iraq's financial institutions. The banking sector itself remains one of the most significant areas of reform. Iraq has spent years modernizing payment systems, strengthening anti-money laundering controls, improving compliance with international banking standards, expanding electronic payment infrastructure, and increasing financial inclusion. These reforms may not generate dramatic headlines every day, but they represent important building blocks for a stronger financial system. International investors typically pay close attention to these institutional improvements. A modern banking system supports investment by reducing financial risk, improving transparency, facilitating international transactions, and encouraging private sector growth. These structural reforms often contribute more to long-term currency confidence than short-term speculation surrounding exchange rate targets. Oil revenue also remains central to Iraq's economic outlook. As one of the world's major oil exporters, Iraq derives a substantial portion of government revenue from crude oil exports. High oil prices generally strengthen government finances by increasing budget revenues, allowing greater public investment and supporting foreign currency reserves. Conversely, lower oil prices can create fiscal pressures that require careful economic management. Because oil markets fluctuate over time, policymakers often seek to diversify the economy beyond hydrocarbons. Expanding agriculture, manufacturing, logistics, tourism, technology, and private enterprise can reduce dependence on oil while creating more sustainable economic growth. Successful diversification may gradually strengthen overall economic resilience, which in turn can contribute positively to long-term currency stability. Foreign currency reserves also deserve attention whenever exchange rate discussions arise. Strong reserves provide central banks with greater flexibility to defend exchange rate stability during periods of financial stress. Healthy reserve levels also reassure investors that the country possesses sufficient external assets to meet international obligations and maintain confidence in the domestic currency. Government budgeting represents another important consideration. Iraq prepares annual budgets based on expected oil revenues, expenditure priorities, public sector salaries, infrastructure investment, and social programs. Significant exchange rate adjustments would influence government finances, import costs, public spending calculations, and private sector pricing. Consequently, policymakers would need to evaluate numerous economic effects before implementing any major currency changes. Inflation remains equally important. Stable inflation helps preserve purchasing power and encourages consumer confidence. If exchange rate changes were introduced without careful planning, inflationary pressures could emerge depending on how imports, wages, and domestic prices respond. This explains why central banks around the world usually prioritize price stability when designing monetary policy. Another topic frequently discussed among Iraqi dinar followers concerns purchasing power. Many investors naturally focus on numerical exchange rates, but purchasing power within the domestic economy also matters greatly. A currency's usefulness depends not only on its international exchange rate, but also on its ability to support stable prices, facilitate trade, encourage investment, and preserve savings over time. It is also worth remembering that currency values reflect confidence. Confidence develops gradually through consistent economic management, transparent policymaking, political stability, legal certainty, and reliable financial institutions. While exchange rates sometimes respond quickly to unexpected events, sustainable appreciation typically reflects years of institutional development rather than isolated announcements. For those following Iraqi monetary developments closely, the most meaningful indicators often include continued banking reforms, improvements in electronic payments, stronger regulatory oversight, increasing foreign investment, expanding private sector activity, rising non-oil economic output, infrastructure development, and continued fiscal discipline. These factors collectively provide a clearer picture of Iraq's long-term economic trajectory than speculation surrounding any single exchange rate target. Short-term implications of the latest commentary are relatively straightforward. Since these remarks represent personal opinion rather than official policy, they do not by themselves alter Iraq's current monetary framework. The Central Bank of Iraq continues to determine exchange rate policy through official channels, and financial markets generally respond to confirmed policy announcements rather than speculative forecasts. Nevertheless, discussions such as these often generate renewed public interest in Iraq's ongoing reforms. Investors, economists, and observers may use these conversations as opportunities to revisit broader questions regarding Iraq's economic modernization, financial sector development, and long-term growth potential. In that sense, the comments encourage debate about future possibilities, even though they do not constitute official guidance. Looking further ahead, Iraq's long-term economic prospects will likely depend more on structural reforms than on any specific exchange rate objective. Continued progress in governance, banking modernization, anti-corruption efforts, infrastructure investment, energy diversification, education, technological development, and private sector expansion may gradually strengthen the country's overall economic foundation. These improvements could enhance investor confidence and support sustainable growth over many years. Political stability also remains a significant variable. Stable institutions help attract investment by reducing uncertainty and encouraging long-term business planning. Domestic reforms, combined with constructive international partnerships, can strengthen economic resilience while expanding opportunities for trade and investment. International cooperation continues to play an important role as well. Iraq works with numerous global financial organizations and maintains relationships with international partners, supporting economic development, banking reform, and fiscal modernization. These partnerships provide technical expertise while encouraging reforms aligned with internationally recognized financial standards. For Iraqi dinar followers, maintaining realistic expectations remains extremely important. Financial markets rarely move according to rumors or personal predictions alone. Instead, they respond to measurable economic performance, verified government policy, credible institutional reforms, and confirmed central bank actions. Responsible analysis therefore requires patience, careful evaluation of official information, and an understanding that economic transformations often unfold gradually rather than overnight. Whenever commentary references precise future exchange rates, viewers should remember that no individual analyst possesses authority to determine a sovereign nation's currency value. Exchange rates emerge from policy decisions, macroeconomic conditions, market confidence, and institutional credibility. While analysts may offer opinions based on their interpretation of available information, those opinions should always be viewed as analysis rather than confirmation. This distinction becomes particularly important in today's digital information environment, where speculation can spread rapidly across social media and online communities. Responsible viewers benefit from comparing multiple credible sources, reviewing official statements, and recognizing the difference between informed commentary and verified announcements. Ultimately, Iraq continues progressing through a broader economic reform process that extends well beyond exchange rate discussions. Banking modernization, digital payments, fiscal management, investment reforms, infrastructure projects, and private sector development all contribute to the country's evolving economic landscape. These long-term initiatives may ultimately prove more influential than any individual prediction regarding future currency values. The comments shared by Frank26 provide insight into one perspective held within portions of the Iraqi dinar community. They highlight optimism regarding Iraq's future, while raising interesting questions about historical exchange rates, inflation adjustments, and potential market dynamics. However, at the present time, these views remain speculative and should not be interpreted as official confirmation of future monetary policy. As responsible followers of Iraqi economic developments, the most productive approach is to monitor verified announcements from Iraqi authorities, observe measurable economic reforms, evaluate official financial data, and remain patient as structural changes continue to unfold. This balanced perspective allows viewers to better understand both the opportunities and the uncertainties associated with Iraq's ongoing economic transformation. Thank you for watching today's Iraqi Dinar News Update. If you appreciate balanced, responsible, and factual analysis of Iraqi monetary developments and economic reforms, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video so you never miss future updates. As always, remember that the information presented in this video is intended for informational and educational purposes only. It should not be considered financial, investment, or legal advice, and viewers should always conduct their own research and consult qualified financial professionals before making any investment decisions.